and welcome to episode number 7 of the LSR Podcast. My name is Matt Brown, joined each and every week by the brightest minds in the gaming industry. This week, Eric Ramsey and Adam Candy, with special guest appearances by Dustin Gowker and Jess Welman coming in. A action-packed show. We also have an interview with SportsGrid president Lou Maione. If you have been over to Legal Sports Report today, or by the time you listen to this over the last couple of days, you will have seen that there is big stuff going on over there at SportsGrid. So we were able to talk to him about that as well. Adam, Eric, thank you for being here, fellas.
Thanks for having us.
Adam just sitting over there on mute, doesn't want to even click the button to say anything to the listeners at home. Your fans are listening.
I realized that less is more, and so I was just waiting for my opportunity. Gotcha.
Please subscribe, rate, and review, guys. We are currently on Stitcher. We are currently on Spotify, Apple. We wouldn't mind you kind of like getting your stuff together over there. We are still pending in the iTunes store there, but we are on Stitcher, we are on Spotify, and of course we are on the LegalSportsReport.com website, so you can head there and take a look at that as well. Find us on the Twitter machine at LSP Report. Let's kick things off here. Eric, tell us about Indiana.
Yeah, so every week it seems like we have a different front runner for first state to pass a new bill this year. Indiana's the front runner this week. The bill we've been watching cleared the House on Monday. This is a Senate-originated bill, so it's already passed the upper chamber. The House signed off on it this week with some changes. Remember, they pulled mobile betting out of that and official league data. There's also some provisions about the casino relocation fees that were changed. So this bill, at the moment, is headed back to the Senate for concurrence to agree to the changes. The Senate is not agreeing to those changes. It's already rejected those changes. So this bill now goes to what's called a conference committee, where 2 members from each chamber will meet to sort of try to hammer out their differences and see if they can come to a consensus on this bill. So it is very close to the finish line. There's still a couple big hurdles to clear, but it's right there, right at the cusp of passage.
Since we've been off for a couple of weeks and maybe we have some new listeners here, can you give them a brief little glimpse into what this bill entails as far as what the particulars are?
Yeah, well, like I said, right now, this is only an in-person betting bill only. As it was drafted, it had provisions for mobile that proved to be a sticking point in one of the committees. So that was taken out. It's actually a sort of a multifaceted bill at its heart that involves, like I said, casino relocation is one of the big keys. It would put a new casino in Terre Haute, Indiana, and move one of the ones in Gary. But yeah, also has provisions to legalize sports betting. We've been hearing that there's a good chance mobile will be back in this before it passes. But right now, as it stands, this close to the finish line, it's in person only.
Adam, we have another state there in the Midwest, in Iowa, that looks like we at least have something kind of moving over there in Iowa.
Something is moving in Iowa. We could have just written that, and it would have been perfect.
There it is. I'm a headline writer as well. Yeah.
That is part of the job. Iowa came together fairly quickly here. This was a bill that it seemed to just kind of be going along at a pretty easy pace. And then all of a sudden yesterday, a compromise deal came together. The Senate voted on it. And this bill looks like it might by early next week be on its way to the governor. Not a terrible bill, not the best, the worst for the industry or for the leagues. You have a little bit of something for everyone in a Frankenstein sense in this bill. You're looking at a pretty reasonable 6 3/4 tax rate that mirrors Nevada, an effective tax rate of 7.5% once you add in some other monies that have to be paid. $45,000 license fee is very small, and you have mobile betting throughout the state, up to 2 skins per licensee, so 2 different brands for each license. The industry probably will not like the in-person requirement for mobile app registration through January 1st of 2021. And we've seen this one popping up a little bit more lately, a ban on prop bets involving in-state college teams. Keep in mind, some other states are trying to ban all prop bets on collegiate sports, but this one is just involving in-state collegiate teams in Iowa. So we have a chance of getting Iowa passed here pretty quickly.
This is good news. As I think over the last couple of weeks, we were kind of getting the news coming out of these states that we weren't necessarily thrilled about, but things seem to be kind of moving in the right direction. However, We do have a state there in Missouri that is certainly not making our list of top 5 bills that are being presented.
I got to tell you, man, this is one of the stranger situations we've seen here in Missouri. So the integrity fee has come back to life in this Missouri sports betting bill. We're talking about the House Bill 119. So the integrity fee is back, but on top of the integrity fee, which they're putting at 0.25% of handle, there's also a fee of 0.75% of handle that goes to maintenance and upkeeps of sports stadiums in Missouri. So that one is a new one. We haven't seen that one anywhere. We've seen some strange movings with this bill to where it got out of committee earlier this week, essentially with the chair of the committee saying to everyone, go ahead and pass everything that's in here because there's no chance this bill survives on the floor. The exact quote from Dean Plocher was, I don't think the measure that we voted out here today will be the measure that actually takes hold on the floor. So it's a weird bill. It's actually started out with a royalty of 0.75% to the leagues. I mean, we haven't seen anything that high since the initial ask of 1% right after PASPA, actually before PASPA. In some cases last year. So there are a couple other bills still hanging around in Missouri. It looks like this is the one, though, that is going to be able to make some moves. It does include statewide mobile, 3 skins per licensee, 8% tax rate and $10,000 application fee. None of those are particularly onerous. The other big stumbling block for the industry in there is the required use of official data for any in-play bets. Basically, anything other than a pregame bet on the final score would have to be official data.
Now, Eric, one of the things that's interesting about this and the integrity fee popping back up, one, we haven't talked about that in quite some time, but secondly, I think the more interesting thing here is that what not only was it volunteered, but it was volunteered at a rate of 3x really what the last time we were hearing about integrity fees, the leagues had, come out and really put out more of that 0.25%. And then this shows up with a voluntary kind of integrity fee thing here, much, much higher than we've seen recently.
Yeah, makes you wonder. I mean, we would assume this language initially originated with the leagues at some point over the last year, but I don't think we've seen a 0.75% integrity fee in any bill. That's sort of a new number. Like you said, now it's been 0.25%. We did see the 1% reappear recently, I think in Arkansas as a proposal. But yeah, everyone is down to 0.25 or 0.2 in the states that are considering it. And yeah, I think a couple of us have been talking to different groups of lawmakers there. The ones I'm talking to say that there is a lot of traction for these fees. There's also official league data in the bill. And yeah, the folks I'm talking to there think there's a pretty good chance that if this bill passes, it will have both integrity fees and the data mandate. If
we only had a puke sound drop to put in right now, right? We would just drop that in right whenever that happens here. But not one, not two, but 3 sports betting bills in the great state of Montana.
Yeah, Indiana's on deck, but actually Montana could have 3 laws in place before anybody else has one. There are 3 separate bills that are all close to the end there. The Senate just this morning, on Thursday morning, passed the 2 bills that were in front of it. One is a tavern model bill that would essentially geofence more than 3,000 taverns for mobile betting in the state. The other one is a lottery model that seems to have the governor's support. There's also a pari-mutuel model bill for horse tracks floating around in the House. The governor supports the lottery model, but proponents actually support all 3. Even the sponsor of the tavern bill wants the competition from the lottery and from the horse tracks as well. So right now, it looks like there's a good chance all 3 of these bills pass, and Montana has a complicated web of sports betting laws.
Now, at one point in your life, you lived in North Carolina, correct?
I did.
You did. So North Carolina, a state that once called you home, looks like may not actually be getting home after all, huh?
Oh man, it's a coin flip right now. The Senate has passed the bill that we've talked about in the past on this podcast. There's a bill that originated in the Senate for tribal sports betting. The Senate passed that late last week to send it to the House. However, there's another effort underway in the House to draft a separate lottery model bill. North Carolina has one of the newest and most ambitious lotteries in the country, and it wants to be involved in sports betting. That really looks like the only thing that might scuttle progress here. This bill has the Senate bill has pretty broad support. The tribes obviously want it. Caesars has a property in the state. But a competing effort all of a sudden might just put a kink in the hose here. This was your lock. I know, this is my first one, and there's some time there. They still make laws for about two or 3 months in North Carolina, so there's time to shake this out. But it took a little step back in my book this week. And Adam, wrapping up our quick hits here at the top, let's all laugh at Tennessee, shall we?
Man, Tennessee was an interesting place to be yesterday. I want to credit Eric as well as Dustin, because we as a team waded our way through 14 hours of hearings in Tennessee yesterday, all to have the primary Tennessee bill narrowly escape the House Finance Committee 10-9 in the wee hours of the evening. And this bill has really changed shape, and it has changed shape with some increased fees, increased taxes, increased use of official data. I mean, the licensing fee in the initial version of House Bill 1 was $7,500, and we've added 2 zeros to that to make it $750,000. Tax rate initially was going to be at 10%. It's moved to 20, and we've seen potentially up to 22.5. Official data is involved in this bill as well. It went from being a brick and mortar bill to being an online only bill. And it looks like it has a puncher's chance here at the very end of the Tennessee session. It was placed on the calendar for next week for a full House vote. Then it already has a hearing scheduled on the Senate side to try to get this thing through before the end of the session. But one of the more interesting moments of that yesterday, that hearing, that one of the hearings we were covering yesterday, came in a fairly tense exchange between Rick Staples, who's the sponsor of House Bill 1, and Representative Andy Holt, who had something very interesting to say about the bill. He says that he thought it moved a little bit too fast, right? He says, personally, I believe, and I think there are others on this committee who believe, that this legislation has been rushed through. I believe the potential ramifications of this legislation are life-altering. I believe that this leads down a path toward, in essence, slavery to an addiction. The state is playing into that addiction, unfortunately. That is one of the more inflammatory quotes that we've seen any legislator use toward any facet of sports betting, and it's something that certainly will color the discussion going forward there in Tennessee.
Yeah, it was. We see some of these statements of kind of, basically taking things and turning it up to level 11, and we continue to see some of these some of these lawmakers come out in states that have lottery. And if you have lottery within your state and you start talking about, the addiction and how this could be so horrible for your people and whatnot, it's just really hard for me to get on board at that point, because, I mean, listen, there is certainly pathways for people to have problems with sports betting, and we are not going to sit here and try to say that there aren't people who don't have enough self-control when it comes to things. There are certainly people who develop an addiction or whatever it might be. However, if your state provides a lottery as well, Mr. Adam, I mean, it kind of is a bit hypocritical when you start talking about, like, we're opening our people up to all this harm.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned the lottery in particular, because that quote from Representative Holt kind of sent me scrambling into the archives to see, what else Representative Holt felt about gambling and lottery and so on. And he is pretty firmly against the lottery as well. Had some quotes along those lines, basically saying that the state is enabling people with its advertising of the lottery to choose between food and lottery tickets. So I don't know that anybody is doing that. I think all of this kind of demagogues in a way that doesn't really help anyone in the discussion. I think that if you have an issue with sports betting or with lottery, there certainly are legitimate points that you can make in your discussion, but these are ways that are just really meant to scare people and to inflame the discussion in a way that I don't think is helpful for anyone.
Eric, we are talked about this offline here, but now we're going to make it public so that you have to do it. We are going to start collecting all of the crazy things that happen at these hearings that you and Adam and Dustin, that you guys get to witness, and we're just going to put them in one place for everybody to witness all at once, because some of these things are just insanity.
Yeah, it's usually hours of monotonous, tedious questions, but every now and then someone says something that's just really absurd. And to Adam's point, the issue is not what he's arguing for. I think the majority of lawmakers understand that problem gambling is an issue that needs to be dealt with. It probably needs money from sports betting allocated to it. Everyone in the industry takes this seriously, but when you start making these disingenuous arguments and conflating issues, likening it to slavery, or talking about the opioid crisis over top of it, you dilute the point you're trying to make,
Absolutely. Now, one of the things that we do here at LSR is we have a jet, and that jet is for people like Adam and Eric to go all over the country and go to these panels and these hearings and these various little things that you don't want to have to go to and you don't want to have to listen to, but they will, and they will tell you what happened. One of those is the NIGA that Adam went to. And Adam, this was, I guess we would have talked about this last week if we had a pod. It's been a couple of weeks now, but still a lot of stuff that went on there worthy of a wrap from you.
I was actually on the floor at NIGA a couple of weeks ago while you guys were recording the podcast, and so I can wrap it for you now. Just to make one point of procedure, though, I have never been on that jet. That has been Eric's jet. We've used it to shuttle him to West Virginia, to Delaware, to all sorts of exotic locations. I had to make the sacrifice of taking a 45-minute flight on Southwest to go to San Diego, and I had to spend 4 days in San Diego. Can you believe it?
I'm sorry. I had a lake weekend planned, and I needed the jet. I'm sorry, buddy.
It is what it is, I guess. But I mean, Adam,
your excuses mean nothing to me.
Adam, and if there was ever a time for us to take advantage of the jet, that's just a little puddle jump right there. A 45-minute-er. It's not even going to cost that much in gas and everything. We really should have utilized that for you.
Truth be told, I could have flown the plane myself. It's just that short of a flight. The convention, I thought, was very informative for understanding the state of how tribal gaming is relating to sports betting these days, and it contrasts really sharply with what you might have seen at a place like the G2E convention last year, where there's a gold rush feeling around the sports betting industry post-PASPA. Tribal nations are taking a much more cautious approach to sports betting. It's for a number of reasons. They are concerned about opening up the compacts that are signed between the tribal nations and the states that govern what games are offered, how money flows between the state and the tribes. They're worried about what happens if they open those up. There's a feeling among the tribes that in those states where they have compacts, they might have, and that's debatable legally, the exclusive right to offer sports betting in their states. There's also some questions regarding the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act and its statement that you need to be on reservation lands in order to gamble. Well, if you have a strict interpretation of that, you would say that tribes are not able to offer mobile sports betting outside reservation lands. So that certainly could be limiting as well. Now, there's some discussion, as we know, in New York about if the server is located inside the casino, is that technically where the bet is placed? Could that logic be applied for the tribes as well? It's certainly to be determined. But I think the interesting message overall was that I don't think sports betting is going to roll out among tribal nations at the same velocity that it has commercially across the United States.
Your takeaway then is from being over there was that there is still much to be figured out and much to be agreed upon with the tribes.
Certainly, and I think the takeaway is underscored by the idea of that there are a lot of legal questions that apply to the tribes, but might also apply in other areas of sports betting that need to be answered before we have a sense of where the future goes for the tribes.
Guys, as mentioned at the top of the show, SportsGrid, it is a company that owns several different websites. It owns Fantasy Sports Network as well. They have partnered up with Sportradar, and with that are going to be launching a 24-hour network based strictly around sports betting. We were able to catch up with SportsGrid President Lou Maione. That was actually Dustin a little bit earlier today, so let's check in with Dustin and Lou.
We'd like to welcome into the podcast SportsGrid President Lou Maione. Just announced today that SportsGrid, his company, in partnership with Sportradar, is launching a 24-hour sports betting network, which is obviously pretty exciting news for people in our parts of the world following all the sports betting news. So, Lou, thanks for coming on the show, and congratulations on the deal and the upcoming launch.
Thank you. Thank you much for having me. Appreciate it.
So I guess first off, my first question is, how long have you guys been working on this?
Yeah, so it's about a year and 3 months. We built, I've been doing this for almost 15 years now. You guys know with, the launch of Roto Experts and the build there and the sale in 2013. And then we quickly built the Fantasy Sports Network. There was other competition that came out, and they slowly died. And we wound up being the only player in the space doing 24 hours of fantasy content. And then we wound up selling off the linear rights and what we built there in Canada and the U.S. We wound up selling that off at the end of 2017. So quickly we began the build of SportsGrid, knowing that wagering was coming to town and hopefully across the U.S. in a short period of time. We started building our content and the vision of what SportsGrid 24-hour free audio and video network would look like based on our success with Fantasy Sports Network. And it's been about a year and 3 months, and it's been all about doing deals, right? What we learned is you need four things, right? You need a strong operating partner. You want to pick the best, like we did back in the day in 2009. We picked FanDuel for fantasy, and then quickly moved to DraftKings in 2012, and then back to FanDuel again late last year. And we did that because we felt that they were going to be the number one operator in the space, both fantasy and sports gambling. So it worked for us because we have a combo deal with FanDuel. So we picked them as the operator. They picked us as the content. We've been working together. That was a huge deal for us. It just continues to get stronger. We're on our third deal with them. We're going to continue to build great content. So we have the operator. Then what you need is you need a strong data tech partner, right? Because there's tremendous amount of cost that go into that. Now we have our infrastructure, we have our talent, we have our content, we have our studios, we have our IP. When it comes to transactional business with Daily Roto, we're seasoned veterans there. I believe we have the best in breed product. We have 7 millionaires there. Jeremy Stein won, $1 million twice in 1 year. You have Drew Dinkmeyer, head of our content, and the rest of them. So we needed that expense to help grow this company and supercharge it. We wanted to make sure we had the right partner, and that was Sportradar. And they have the ad server, they have the tech, they have the CDNs, they have the fan engagement tools, all the data and analytics that nobody really can get, right. Because it's so expensive. So that was really important. We have a league partner in the NBA. We do some tremendous content for them. I think we have about 5 shows going with them, and we're going to take that partnership to the next level. So we have the league partner. Now, the next thing we need, like I said, we have infrastructure. We have the New York studios. We have studios elsewhere, but we want the home of the SportsGrid. We're going to be making that announcement soon. And those are the 4 deals we've been working on the last 6 months. Lawyering and doing all the stuff there takes time, but we wanted to come out right. And we wanted to make sure that we weren't making the same mistakes others were making. And we wanted to be the first. Getting the market share is the most important. Being first to market and having a go-to-market strategy and the right partners is the way you win. And we will win this game.
Yeah, and FanDuel, last numbers out of New Jersey, a pretty dominating lead both for retail and online sports betting. So that positions you guys pretty well as well, obviously.
Yeah, 55%. And we're very excited about that partnership, and we're going to be taking that to the next level as well.
Might be a little too early for this question, but like if you're just a casual listener turning in, you think, oh man, I want to check this out. When and where will you be able to watch to catch this? If you're just a sports bettor wanting to watch all this content.
Yeah. So right now what we've done is we test shows. We put them out there. You can get them on YouTube. You can get them on Pluto, Zumo, some of the connected TV type. You can get it iHeart, TuneIn. There's multiple ways, Xbox. There's so many ways that you can get us. And that, again, is the infrastructure and the assets that we were able to accumulate over the years, right? We kept those partnerships. We kept them happy. So there's shows being tested all the time that are out there. What's great about Sportradar, this deal, is not only do we get everything that I just said previously, we also get the data, right? We can see what people are engaging with. And we're able then to say, okay, these shows got to go. These shows got to continue. We can go out and get influencers in the states that come aboard. They can pipe into our shows out of New York and the studio we're going to be naming soon, the home of SportsGrid. So we're prepared for that. But right now, you can get us digitally. We're a digitally focused company, digital first, right? So you have to remember that. Yes, will we show up in linear just like fantasy did? Absolutely. If the deal is right, I'll have it done, and you'll get us on your traditional television as well.
I've already seen this joke made a couple times, but given that you've done this with fantasy already, people are saying, how do you fill up 24 hours of programming a day with sports betting? And to listen to you, this is it's a no-brainer, and you're going to be able to do it easily.
Yeah. So what we're doing is we have a choice, right? So this partnership with Sportradar, the idea is that they have certain assets, we have certain assets. Together, we can't be beat on a 24-hour network for a few reasons. One, you have what we call in the can, think evergreen type content. So what you do is, let's say you're calling the shot show or Make It Rain show, our Game Time Decision show, or Sports Rage Against the Machine. All those shows are heavy 100% gambling type shows, right? But then you sprinkle in other shows, Best Friends Forever, some FanDuel stuff, the DFS players. You sprinkle that in SportsGrid, and you kind of see if you get that core audience. But in between all of that, you're running responsible gaming content. You're running the business of gambling content. You're running a gambling university, right? What's a parlay? That's how you fill it up. That's the trick that I've learned, is that you have to know the times when to put things out. You have to read the data and see what the engagement is. So that's how you build a 24-hour network. Now, what happens here, guys, is that what we're going to do is, as we roll out this content, like I said, we're looking for influencers in certain states, right? And of course, we're working with operators, publishers, and all these folks, because the idea of this partnership is not just to put out content. It's to produce content that's engaging, right? It produce content that allows people to get the education, the stats, and everything they need to have the edge to win, just like in fantasy, right? So what you do is you have the operators out there that are looking for this, one stop, and I hate using that, but 360 type approach, digital first, social, mobile, global type approach, digitally focused. And what happens is, they have to go to agencies. They have to do, buy what iTunes. They got to do, iHeart and TuneIn, and then they have to linear. If they want some linear commercials, they have to do all this stuff. But we have it all. Why? Because we have the operators that are sitting there saying, we need your content, and they want to pay per show. I'm saying, no, let's do a bigger deal. Do a media buy against it. You have the tech, the data, unbelievable stats that give folks the edge, the overlays, the fan engagement inhibit, and things that Sportradar has. You have our content, our talent, our credibility. You have our infrastructure. Together, we go to a publisher. It could be Gannett. It could be Sports Illustrated. It could be anybody, right? That Sportradar or I have relationships with over the years. We take their views. We give them the content, the player. We give them the analysis. We give them the overlays. We give them the engagement that they're so, badly craving. And they don't have to spend any money because they have it. They put that on their gambling tab, and boom, they're lit up. They have everything that their consumer wants. They're happy. We get those views. They push us through their pipe. We take those views and guarantee it against what? The operator media buy. Now, the operator gets what they want. Some may want their odds to be shown, their promotions to be shown. They just want the content skinned in their colors for branding. If you're a new player on the block, right? So we're solving all the problems in a one-stop shop. And again, that is the crust of this relationship between us and Sportradar. It's like something you've never seen. It's like, think CNBC or Bloomberg. I was in that world, Credit Suisse, Deutsche Bank. That was on all the time in the background. The difference is that it's going to be premillennial, millennial, one-to-one, one-to-many model, where what you're going to see is that the data that is there is going to also give you the edge. You don't have to listen to it. You can just watch it. It's something like you've never seen before.
Right. The part that's exciting for me is that you're focused on the legal and regulated market. Obviously, you're going to catch, just casual sports bettors betting offshore or whatever. But you guys are really going to be on the forefront here. You're going to be you have the partnership with FanDuel already. You're going to be looking to. You're in New Jersey, Pennsylvania. Online sports betting going to be launching real soon. This content is designed for people that are betting in legal and regulated markets first and foremost. If I'm not speaking for you.
Absolutely. And you're not, and for us, DGE, went up and gave us a cavity search. We came up squeaky clean. They love the way we operate. We're registered in New Jersey and going everywhere that we possibly can as the states roll out. With the partnership with Sportradar, they are also squeaky clean, and they have basically, think like a retail size license. We have the one underneath, and together we're able to become a really, really strong. If we wanted to, we can white label sports books together, right, and give them the content and the package that they need, and also give them the legal advice that they need, plus the responsible gaming content. That's the package you get if you're somebody new coming into, and you want to buy on and get some market access. We can get you up and running pretty quickly. We have no desire to be a sports book. Why? We believe low margins, regulatory issues, legal costs. It's a low margin game. We want to be outside of that. We want to collect all the money that's sitting outside without the regulatory problems and the small margin and the promotion and the risk management that has to take place there. We want to run our lane. Dr. J told me once, Lou, just run your lane, and that's what I do. We run our lane, and we're very good at it, and we have the partners to take us to the next level. And that's really key. And responsible gambling is super important. Nobody's doing it. You see, where we don't deal with the offshore books. We don't deal with any of that. I think that's why folks look at us and say, they're doing it right. They're slow. They're quiet. They take, methodical, giant, quiet steps. But as you'll see, we'll be rolling out these partnerships, and more press releases will come. And these deals will solidify us as the number one sports gambling property on the planet, which is, by the way, free. There's nobody else doing that. We flipped the model upside down, and I think people are taking notice.
Well, it's cool. Look forward to seeing more out of you guys in the near future. Thanks for coming on the podcast with us, Lou.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks to Lou for taking the time to talk to us today about this. Very interesting. I mean, we've seen, Eric, we've seen VEASAN come about. Of course, they're a couple of years old at this point. Certainly a radio station first and foremost, as opposed to, an actual network, though they do have a video feed now that you can subscribe to. I think one of the things that SportsGrid is really trying to hammer home here is that it is completely free. With all of this, I've seen people on Twitter kind of opine one way or the other as to whether there is sports betting, enough sports betting news essentially to power a 24-hour network here. But, look, I am all for people trying out things within the industry. So certainly wish the guys at SportsGrid the best.
Yeah, and some of this, this reminds us a lot of fantasy sports, maybe, 4 or 5, 6 years ago, the way it began being integrated into our mainstream media coverage. Maybe there's not enough appetite for a 24/7 network over the long term, but this is sort of maybe a little step into broadcast mediums. And, as part of preparing the story, I read a story on LSR from literally 4 years ago about expecting to see more of Matthew Berry on the ESPN coverage. And now we just take it for granted. On Sunday, we're going to see fantasy coverage. So, a lot of parallels to what we saw with DFS here in this new brave new world of sports betting we have here.
And Adam, to kind of contradict the thought that there's not enough, to talk about for a 24-hour sports betting network, you and I both have sports radio experience. And really all it is whether you're doing the 9 o'clock show or the noon show or the 3 o'clock show or the 6 o'clock show, everybody's talking about the same stuff. It's like you're just rehashing things that are going on throughout the day or the stuff that happened the day before, and everyone's talking about the same stuff. You just have a different take on it or a different opinion on it. So I don't see where this is that much different and why people would be like, oh, this can never work. There's not enough to talk about. When, I mean, it's essentially just sports talk radio with you have different, you have different characters essentially, and you have different personalities. And so I don't know. I think that argument is a little weak.
I think you can work in sports betting talk into what's already there. Of course, there can be content that is specifically dedicated to sports betting for the hardcore folks. I mean, VSiN is reaching out to folks who are really into this, and that's the kind of content they produce. But you can work sports betting into the day-to-day content that you do on sports radio or on, the ESPN talking head shows that are essentially sports radio turned into television. You're really just talking about little things. You don't have to talk about deep records against the spread and things like that and guide people on sports betting. You can just kind of talk about the interesting bets, the interesting props. You can talk about, big parlays that hit, things like that are sort of tangential. They're not the core of things in the industry, but there's plenty that you can work in that doesn't have to be for the person who spends all day at the book.
Absolutely. Here we talked about Eric taking the Catena Jet, and he took that Catena Jet. And if you did not see this last week at Online Poker Report, again, we have several sites within our family, so be sure and check out Online Poker Report. Eric does a great job over there, but did a particularly great job in covering the arguments in the Wire Act lawsuit over in New Hampshire federal court. You were there in person, Eric. Take us inside the courtroom.
I was there in person. Try to give you the quick backstory here. If this is the first time you're hearing of the Wire Act lawsuit, earlier this year, the U.S. Department of Justice sort of reversed its stance on the way a 1961 federal law applies to gambling. It pretty narrowly applies to sports betting as it's written, but the DOJ wants to broaden that to cover possibly all forms of online gambling, including things like lottery sales, maybe even interstate Powerball in a retail setting. So this has spawned a legal challenge in New Hampshire initiated by the New Hampshire Lottery and joined by a bunch of other parties. And the two sides held arguments last week, and I had the chance to be there, which was really a great opportunity to sort of see this all coming together. This is going to have a major impact on what we all do and how we all gamble going forward. The top line takeaway is it went pretty well for the things we enjoy doing. The DOJ had a tough time making its case. The judge sort of poked some holes in the way it's been handled. I guess on both sides, he was pretty fair about that. But the general timbre of the hearing was that the DOJ is going to have some trouble convincing the courts that this opinion is valid.
Yeah, as following your coverage here, I got the sense that just from you sitting there, of course, no one quote unquote won or anything like that, but you certainly felt like if you had to pick a winner, it certainly would not have been the DOJ.
So one of the things that I keep talking about is how relaxed and sort of conversational the proceedings were. It was more like being at a dinner table with a bunch of lawyers, and the judge was not afraid to sort of interject in the arguments and sort of offer his on the fly reactions to what both sides were saying. And most of the times he indicated that something struck him. It was an argument from the plaintiff side, the lottery side.
It was certainly this is an ongoing story here. This is something we will be covering and watching very, very, very closely here. And so, again, head over to onlinepokerreport.com. You will be able to find it. Eric's just complete coverage of the event. And man, this is it's very important. I don't think people completely realize, that this really could affect kind of how everything moves forward here. I think that we all feel a little more comfortable after hearing the way that things went down. Certainly talking to some of the lawmakers, certainly talking to some attorneys and things like that. They don't seem to think that there's a ton of teeth in all of this. But again, we are going to be monitoring very, very closely with all of that, just like we have been monitoring these numbers every single time that they come out of New Jersey over there. Adam, we are 3 months deep into 2019, and we have surpassed 1 billion in handle over there in New Jersey already through the first 3 months of the year.
What's really impressive about that is it took us the entirety of 2018 in sports betting in New Jersey to cross that $1 billion mark, and it's happened pretty quickly this year. Very, very impressive New Jersey totals in March Madness. We kind of wondered whether March Madness would be as big a deal outside Nevada, since it's not, in New Jersey, maybe the same destination that it is Las Vegas to come out and bet on that first weekend especially. But New Jersey with $372 million in handle with a hold of 32 million, so 8.5%, pretty good. Last month, if you remember, with the Super Bowl, revenue came in at just 12.7 million for a 3.9% hold. So much, much better overall. I think the real story, though, is FanDuel. FanDuel Sportsbook had an unreal month, 17.5 million, 55% of the entire New Jersey sports betting market came from FanDuel Sportsbook at Meadowlands Racetrack. A little more than 13 million of that was wagered online for the third consecutive month. More than 80% of all bets in New Jersey were placed via a mobile device. So we mentioned the 17.5 for FanDuel. DraftKings Sportsbook, which had been the early market leader in New Jersey, just 7.3 million, which is pretty flat. I mean, DraftKings kind of held the line for where they've been, but the growth for FanDuel has really, truly been remarkable. That's now 3 of the last 4 months that FanDuel has been the top performing operator in the state. But I don't even know if that's the story, so much the size of the margin as well. And I don't know. I guess they're both equally impressive when you look at it.
Eric, you live in New York currently. So for a little perspective for Adam and I, what have you seen a bigger advertising blitz from FanDuel? Has there been crazy promotions from FanDuel? Is there any sort of hypothesis we have as to how not only they close that gap, but were able to not only close the gap, but surpass where we thought DraftKings was looking like they might run away with this thing?
No, I'm probably a bit insulated up here in upstate New York from some of that advertising that I'm sure is going around in the New York City area. It's hard for me to sort of try to figure out where this trend is coming from. I think I have a hunch a lot of it can be attributed to my fellow New Yorkers crossing the border. I know retail sports betting, not the driver that online is, but as to have a retail book where you can show folks your application seems like a good move for FanDuel. That's convenient to New York City. So I don't really know. My only hunch is that the foot traffic is actually boosting the online revenue too.
I think one of the things that we really need to drive home here, and fortunately you guys are so good at what you do, we actually do have people that listen to this podcast that are of influence. And one of the things to drive home here of the over $1 billion that was wagered in so far in 2019 over there in New Jersey, that over 800 million of that was via either online or mobile. And so, Adam, we continually, whenever we talk about these states and these bills that are being introduced here, we continue to say you are really, really, really going to fall short of your projections and your numbers and things like that if you do not have online and mobile as part of your bill. And I mean, I guess it is shocking to me that you could see these numbers coming out of New Jersey. Again, 3 months into the year at $1 billion and 80% of that money coming from online or mobile and not included in your bill. It just seems very short-sighted to me.
There was an Associated Press article talking about sports betting revenue projections falling short around the country that I think missed a couple of points. One, that the revenue projections were way off in the first place and assumed that sports betting was going to bring in more money than it was. Everyone who has talked about this from the industry side has talked about the small hold that sports betting ultimately has. It's a business that has to win on volume. When you want to build that volume, you have to have mobile wagering. Look at Rhode Island. Rhode Island projected somewhere in the range of $23 million in its first year and isn't going to come close to that. And Rhode Island quickly figured out after launching in the fall that it needed mobile. It went back into its legislative session this year. It passed and signed a mobile bill. It's the first significant sports betting bill that made it through a legislature this year. So Rhode Island adjusted quickly to the fact that it did not have mobile sports betting. And I wouldn't be surprised, even if some of these states ultimately pass in person only, which from a revenue perspective is likely a mistake, I don't think it's going to last long when they see what they're missing out on. I think that, the potential evils that some people feel mobile could introduce are things that with education, a lot of legislators will see are easily dealt with in terms of age verification and making sure that, we're not enabling problem gambling among underage and things like that. I think when you look at the benefits of what mobile sports betting can bring in terms of revenue, and you look at the safeguards that are in place, a lot of those opposing arguments might fall.
I can only hope people are reading y'all's material over at LSR and OPR on all of this, because again, we only want the best for the industry, and of course we are not going to see the very best of the industry so long as people continue to not see the forest for the trees here. One of the big states that we have been following along for several months now is Pennsylvania, and we have a resident Pennsylvania expert in Jess Welman, who's going to join us right now to talk about what is going on in Pennsylvania. Now joining us on the LSR pod, our resident Pennsylvania expert, Jess Welman. Jess, thank you for being here with us.
Hi, friends.
We are so happy to have you back on the podcast. And with this news that you are about to bring everyone, you will now be on the podcast all the time, because are we finally seeing the finish line here?
I finally get to come on this podcast and say something happy, which I don't think has happened yet. We have launch dates in Pennsylvania, like not, maybe, not, wait till the summer, like dates.
So before you spill the goods here, give everyone just a brief overview of where we sit right now in Pennsylvania.
In terms of what's live right now?
Yeah, just as far as sports betting goes in the great state of Pennsylvania, where do we sit right now?
So you've got 8 retail sports books throughout the state, most of them in the Philadelphia area, which is why like Rivers is kind of winning at everything so far, because they've got Pittsburgh on lockdown. It's a monopoly. And you've got 3 more in the pipeline. Presque Isle is going to come June 1st, and then Mount Airy and Mohegan Sun Pocono, they just submitted applications. So I have a feeling they'll probably get online before football, both for retail and hopefully for online, but they will be a little later than everyone else.
Now, this is really a big deal, because when everything came out on the Pennsylvania side of things, there were so many people who initially jumped the gun saying, well, no one's going to apply there. Everything, this is horrible. The fees are too high. The taxes are too high. And then here we are, as we approach the middle of the summer here, a couple months down the road here, be the middle of the summer. And we will not only have people going from a retail standpoint, but we do have a finish line. We do have dates involved for online and mobile as well, correct?
Not so on sports betting, it's not as concrete, but we can give you a pretty clear window, which is that the first app will begin live testing. They told LSR this week, 2 to 3 weeks. So I probably before the end of April, very latest early May, you will have one up and running. How quickly those roll out after that, we're still kind of guessing, but I think anybody's just happy for an option. So good news, an option is coming probably before the Derby.
Now, what brands will people most likely see coming to Pennsylvania? Of course, we talked a little bit earlier on this podcast about the resurgence and just the absolute domination we're seeing over in Jersey from FanDuel. Will we see the brands that people have basically come to know and love over in New Jersey? Yes, with one glaring exception. DraftKings still doesn't really have a path into Pennsylvania, unlike New Jersey, where they can rack up multiple online betting apps on a single license. In Pennsylvania, it is single skin, which means each operator, each casino gets one skin, and that skin needs to have its name involved in the title. So it will be FanDuel, Valley Forge powered by FanDuel Sportsbook at Valley Forge. That will be some version of the name of the app. You'll have FanDuel, you'll have Sugar House, which New Jersey people certainly know and understand. You will have Caesars. You will have BetStars little later on down the line. They work with Mount Airy. And you will have William Hill,
racking my brain. Adam, Eric, am I forgetting any big operators?
You'll see Churchill Downs with Bet America too, I would assume, right?
Yes, you will. I said big brands. Yes, we'll have Churchill Downs eventually. I mean, in terms of like the massive players, you will have, without DraftKings, most of them. What will be, I think, a very big player that does not exist in New Jersey just yet, but they've dabbled in trying to get there, is you will have a Parx branded sportsbook. Parx is the biggest casino in Pennsylvania. It is one of the more successful ones going on the retail side right now. And they have an app from Kambi, who does DraftKings and Sugar House and others, in the pipeline that I think will probably be one of the first ones you see.
So you mentioned
Kambi is ahead of the curve on the rest of these folks.
So you mentioned the retail side. Since we don't have online and mobile there currently, what kind of numbers have we seen coming out of Pennsylvania as far as sports betting?
So I am glad you asked this, because there are a bunch of stories going around right now about how Pennsylvania sports betting tax revenue is about half what they projected, which is true. It's been on the lower side. Last month with March Madness, it was about $45 million in, I'm spacing, revenue or handle. Sorry, it has been a week of busyness.
Handle. That was handle, total betting.
Thank you. Like I said, long week, many, many things happening, which is the best month that they've had so far. But, compared to the numbers you guys talk about New Jersey, we're still talking like 15, 20% of what they're doing. So relatively small. What is being left out of this story is each of these groups paid $10 million to be in this market. So in terms of total sports betting revenue for the state that's coming in for the year, they are easily meeting the $100 million that they projected to come in. Like, it's not even, they knew they were going to hit it forever ago. That to say that it's like not up to where expectations were because online is a little behind is, I would say, a disingenuous representation of what's going on.
Now, Eric, you and Adam, you guys crunch numbers. You guys make projections. That's why we have you smart people on this podcast. Have you put together any sort of projections for Pennsylvania once they are able to go online and mobile?
I have not. I know we've seen some projections from analysts in the industry. I don't know them offhand. Adam, what you got for numbers?
I'm more extrapolating off what we've seen next door in New Jersey. I know the number of betting options is slightly different, but New Jersey is roughly 3.5 million people smaller than Pennsylvania. However, when you add in the New York City influence in the New Jersey market, the populations kind of even out pretty closely. We know that last month, Pennsylvania, we're looking at just over 44 million in handle, and in New Jersey, we saw 372 million in handles. So if you kind of take what we've seen in terms of population size and in terms of what we see next door in New Jersey, we would think that Pennsylvania market could get to be just about to the same size pretty easily.
So not to steal Matt's thunder and ask questions, but question for you, Adam, is how many people do you think New Jersey dips at all because Philadelphia doesn't have to drive across state lines anymore?
The question will be for Philadelphia, how many of those people are going into the options in Philadelphia right now? Because what will change will be the mobile option. If you're someone who's wanting to go and have the retail experience in Philadelphia, then it won't change because you've already had that option for the last 4 months. And we've seen New Jersey have 3 of its most successful months in terms of handle in 2019. So I don't think that changes a whole lot, but the mobile effect certainly will be noticeable. I don't think it's going to be enough to really derail what's going on in New Jersey for as long as New York can't get its act together. I think where you start to worry about New Jersey is when New York finally, if ever, gets its mobile up and running.
Don't forget that Pennsylvania will also be drawing some, Pennsylvania has a lot more border territory than New Jersey does. It has, think about West Virginia to its south, which has already become familiar with online betting, but doesn't have it currently. You're going to see some folks sneaking across the border. Ohio been contemplating sports betting, also shares a border with Pennsylvania. So we keep looking at that East Coast, but as you look to the western border of Pennsylvania, there's some chance to pull some traffic from other states too.
For sure, especially like Cleveland. That's very close to Erie, which is, if you want a retail book, you can go to Presque Isle Downs. But I mean, even just the Youngstown, Cleveland sports base coming over to Pennsylvania, I think will be a draw. Where I am still hesitant to comment in terms of expectations is you haven't necessarily seen what the lines are going to look like on mobile. You have and you haven't. It's a very different tax situation in Pennsylvania compared to New Jersey. That the kinds of deals that you might get in New Jersey, the kinds of favorable lines you might get in New Jersey, you may not see in Pennsylvania because they have a 34% tax rate to overcome. And I think, we've certainly seen the savvy line shoppers on Twitter and elsewhere that maybe it's worth it to keep going to New Jersey. Maybe the gas money far outweighs the deals and the bonuses and the promos that you can potentially get that we just don't know yet if Pennsylvania will be financially, from a marketing standpoint, in a position to offer.
Yeah, that was actually one of the things I was going to bring up is I think with another really big state opening up and with it being on a border of a state that already is legal and up and running, I'm actually very, very curious as to kind of how the marketing battles will go and how the various promotions will go and how that is. How are you going to try to keep that business within the state lines is certainly something that I'm really, really looking forward to kind of monitoring as soon as they get up and going there in Pennsylvania. But Jess, over at Play Pennsylvania, you obviously not only cover the sports betting side of things, but you also cover just the online gaming side of things in general. And so one of the things that we have in Pennsylvania as well is online casino.
It's coming, and it has an official date. It is July 15th. It's going to be a big day whereas sports betting is going to be rolling out on an as operators get their basis. I think that, some infighting across the casinos led to this idea of a simultaneous rollout. Everybody who wants to launch, if they are ready by July 15th, everybody's launching on July 15th. There are 10 current licensed operators that want to do interactive casino and poker in Pennsylvania. I would say of the 10, I would expect 7 to 8 to be ready. Sands isn't ready because they're still switching over licenses to the new owner. Stadium isn't ready. They don't even have a casino yet. But I think you're going to see, 6 to 8 online casinos really eager to get market share, even though, again, you've got a huge tax hurdle to get over. What I don't think you'll see as much, I would guess at most 3 online poker operators go on the 15th. There's just not money in it. And if you don't know that compacting can happen because Wire Act is still up in the air, if it is still up in the air in July, talking with people believe that some of these operators that aren't PokerStars, WSOP.com, they're not going to bother with it right away.
Eric, you obviously run Online Poker Report and follow this very closely. With the Pennsylvania situation, everyone, when this was announced, thought it would just be a done deal. They would share traffic with everybody else that was still going. It seems as if the momentum for that has come to a screeching halt, but we haven't heard definitively one way or another, right?
Yeah, we haven't. We know from Executive Director Kevin O'Toole that Pennsylvania's sort of taken the most conservative approach to this. It's the only one that we've really seen communicate with operators about complying in full with the Wire Act. The plan all along since this law passed was to share in online poker liquidity. Now that's in a little bit of jeopardy. As a counterpoint, though, even with a few operators, this will instantly become the largest online poker market in the U.S. We're still trying to recover from the events that have gotten us to this point with scant state ring-fenced online poker. But this is, even interstate compacts aside, this is a really big step for U.S. online poker.
It is. And I do think, too, I'm presenting it as a negative that they're not all going to launch. This is a state that has 8 approved online poker licensees, and you've got MGM, who is in this process of being a qualified outside entity, trying to get it as well. I think you can see from New Jersey, I don't believe 9 online poker sites in Pennsylvania without compacting. I don't know even if with compacting that is sustainable.
No,
I think that's far too many operators in the market. But if you can get just even, let's just say, Stars and WSOP up and running. You've got a situation unlike Nevada where you do have competition. There is incentive to win customers over with promotions and good marketing plans. But you also don't have a situation like in New Jersey where every time I see these poker numbers, I'm like, oh man, these are a struggle. And I think, it'll probably end up being from the jump a little bit healthier than some of these other markets.
Adam, before we get out of here, one thing to mention here with Pennsylvania is the fact that they are offering casino as well as sports betting. One of the things we've seen in New Jersey is we have seen the numbers increase, kind of, the rising all tide, whatever, rise all tides, whatever the hell the saying is, or something like that.
That's exactly what it is. Rise all, it's roll tide, rise all.
Yeah, roll tide, whatever, and all that. But one of the things I think we can see here is, Pennsylvania, I could only assume we're going to see cross sell here. So, I mean, it's with having both of these launching by, the middle of the summer, each are going to probably help each other here.
I think one of the ironic things about this whole situation is that, as you mentioned, the cross-sell has been huge in New Jersey. You've seen a significant bump up in online casino revenue. And one of the first to really make that cross-sell front and center and make it easy was DraftKings. DraftKings has its own casino. And, of course, DraftKings is the one who's struggling to find an online presence in Pennsylvania right now. So it's definitely going to be something that the casinos are looking toward. As we talked about, sports betting on its own is not a huge revenue driver, but when you can use that as a means of getting people into casino as well, then you certainly increase the margins.
Absolutely. Jess, what can people expect? What do people get when they head to playpennsylvania.com?
They get a little bit of everything. And honestly, we're a bit overrun with news this week. So not only did we have this announcement about dates, we had sports betting revenue numbers come out. We cover the lottery and online lottery as well. I need to find time to write about someone who just won a $1.5 million fast play ticket in Pennsylvania. These Pennsylvania folks love their lottery, which is why I certainly hope the PA lottery keeps being a Wire Act bringer, downer, supporter. And yeah, we cover everything really. And then we've also got the Pennsylvania takes on the national stories that Adam and Eric are covering in terms of the Wire Act case and how it will impact our market. And so you can follow us on @PlayPANews on Twitter. And go over and check us out at playpennsylvania.com.
Absolutely. And follow Jess on Twitter, too, @Jess Welman, @AdamCandy, @Eric_Ramsey. I am @MattBrownM2. Guys, thanks for listening this week. For Jess, for Adam, for Eric, I'm Matt. See you next week.